You put on clothes this morning without thinking. Shirt, pants, shoes, maybe a jacket. You did it in under 3 minutes and probably never once asked yourself why. But that question, why you cover your body at all, has one of the strangest answers in all of human science. And it has almost nothing to do with what you were taught. The obvious answer is warmth, protection, modesty. Those answers feel right. They feel logical. But when researchers actually started digging into the fossil record, into the genetics of the tiny creatures that live on your body right now, and into the archaeology of the oldest known human sites, a completely different picture emerged. One that says clothing wasn't about covering the body. It was about something far more ancient, far more desperate, and far more human. To understand it, you have to go back, way back. Not to the first sewn garment, not to the first animal hide draped over a shoulder. You have to go back to a moment roughly 170,000 years ago, in the middle of a period scientists call the last glacial maximum, when the temperature of Earth dropped so dramatically that most of sub-Saharan Africa turned cold and dry. Your ancestors didn't live in caves in Europe yet. They lived in Africa, and they were losing the fight against the cold. Here is where it gets strange, because human skin, compared to nearly every other large mammal, is almost completely bare. You are, by any biological standard, a naked ape. And that nakedness was not always an advantage. Evolutionary biologist Nina Jablonski at Penn State has spent decades studying the evolution of human skin, and her research points to something most people don't expect. Humans lost their body hair long before they needed to worry about cold climates. The hair didn't go away because of clothing. The clothing came because the hair was already gone. So why did the hair disappear in the first place? The leading hypothesis is thermoregulation. But not keeping warm, keeping cool. Your early ancestors were endurance hunters. They chased prey across open savanna for hours. Every other animal on that savanna overheated and stopped. But a nearly hairless body covered in sweat glands could shed heat while running. You were built to run long distances in blazing sun. You were, quite literally, designed to overheat less than everything you were hunting. That design worked perfectly in the African heat. Then, the climate changed, and suddenly the same naked skin that had made your ancestors the greatest endurance hunters on Earth became a liability. When temperatures dropped, they had nothing. No fur, no thick hide, just exposed skin and the intelligence to figure out what to do next. This is the moment when something remarkable happened. Not just the invention of clothing, but possibly the first act of true human problem-solving at scale. Because making clothing from animal hides is not simple. You have to hunt. You have to skin the animal. You have to scrape the hide, dry it, soften it, cut it, and then fasten it to your body in a way that stays on. That process requires planning. It requires tools. It requires knowledge passed from one person to another. In other words, it requires culture. Anthropologist Ian Gilligan at the University of Sydney has argued that clothing is one of the most underappreciated cognitive leaps in human prehistory. Not fire, not language, clothing, because the moment humans learned to reshape the natural world into something that extended their own body's capabilities, they crossed a line that no other animal had ever crossed in quite the same way. A bird builds a nest, a beaver builds a dam. But a human looked at a dead mammoth, understood that its fur could become their fur, and acted on that understanding deliberately. That is a different kind of thinking entirely. And here is the counterintuitive part. The earliest evidence of clothing is not a garment. There are no preserved animal hides from 170,000 years ago. What researchers found instead was something else entirely. Lice. Specifically, the genetic divergence between head lice and body lice. You carry two types of lice. Head lice live in your hair. Body lice live in clothing. They are closely related, close enough that scientists can use their genetic split to estimate when humans first started wearing clothes regularly. Because body lice need clothing to survive. They can't exist without it. And in 2011, a team led by geneticist David Reed at the Florida Museum of Natural History used the mutation rate in louse DNA to calculate when those two populations diverged. Their estimate, roughly 170,000 years ago, almost exactly when the climate crashed. Think about what that means. The oldest evidence of human clothing is not a needle, not a scraper, not a preserved hide. It is the evolution of a parasite, a tiny creature adapted so completely to living in your clothes that its very existence tells you when the first shirt was worn. Now let's move forward in time. Around 120,000 years ago, the climate warmed again, and you might expect clothing to disappear, or at least to fade in importance. But it didn't, because something else had happened. Wearing clothes had become more than survival. It had become identity. Archaeologists working at sites across Africa and the Middle East have found evidence that by this period, humans were using ochre, a red mineral pigment, to decorate their bodies and almost certainly their clothing. They were using shells as beads. They were selecting specific animal pelts not just for warmth, but for appearance. The leopard's spots, the lion's mane, the color of a particular bird's feathers. Clothing had shifted from a survival technology to a communication system. It told other humans who you were, what group you belonged to, what status you held, what you had killed. This is the moment that connects 170,000 years ago to the shirt on your back right now, because you do not choose your clothes based on warmth. Not primarily. You choose them based on what they say about you. You wear colors that signal mood. You wear brands that signal status. You wear styles that signal which tribe you belong to. Your music, your politics, your values, your identity. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did on an African savanna when they draped a particular hide over their shoulders and walked into a rival group's territory. Clothing is not modesty. Modesty came much later, a cultural layer built on top of something far older. The fig leaf in the biblical story of Adam and Eve is about shame, about awareness. But shame requires a complex theory of mind, requires knowing that others are perceiving you. That came after, long after. What came first was cold. And then came intelligence, and then came the realization that what you wore changed how others saw you. There's one more piece of this story that almost nobody talks about. The needle. The oldest known sewing needles in the world were found in the Denisova cave in Siberia and have been dated to approximately 50,000 years ago. For a long time, these were associated with Homo sapiens. Then genetic analysis revealed that the Denisova cave was also home to a group of ancient humans called the Denisovans, a separate branch of the human family tree that overlapped with both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. And those needles may have belonged to them, which raises a possibility that changes everything you thought you knew about early humans. Clothing technology. The ability to sew fitted, tailored garments may not have been invented once by your direct ancestors. It may have been invented multiple times by multiple types of human across tens of thousands of years of parallel experimentation. Neanderthals almost certainly wore clothes too. Their range extended deep into cold northern Europe. They used tools. They survived ice ages. The idea that they did so with bare skin strains all credibility. They just didn't leave lice behind to prove it. So this morning, when you got dressed, you were not performing a modern ritual. You were performing one of the oldest human acts there is. Older than agriculture, older than writing, older than civilization, by a distance so vast it is almost impossible to comprehend. You were solving the problem that nearly ended your species 170,000 years ago. And at the same time, you were broadcasting to every person who would see you exactly who you are. The cold made you practical. The culture made you expressive. And somewhere in between those two things, the human being you are today was born. You put on clothes this morning without thinking, but your ancestors thought about almost nothing else.